Hi everyone, this is just a quick video to give an explanation on the basics of setting up an inventory constraint. Inventory constraints add the ability to create a virtual container that constrains in two directions. That means if you add so much that you reach the container limit, you will constrain the adding task, and if you remove so much that you empty the container, you will constrain the removing task. A common example might be to set it up to simulate a stockpile, and because this is generally a little bit more involved in the setup than the other types of constraints, I'm going to run through it step by step. We're going to run a manually specified, and we're going to give it an initial value, so our stockpile is going to hold 50,000. But before we get into the adding and removing part, in order for an inventory constraint to work, we'll need tasks that add to the container and that remove from them. So in this example, I already have a coal process, which is doing the job of adding, but we need something that will take the value off of the inventory constraint. So in order to do that, we need to go through a few things step by step. So the first thing we're going to want to do normally on our source is to add at the highest level, at the lowest index here, to add a new level. I'm just going to call it stockpile. This helps us separate it out from a lot of other dependencies that might be related to living within a particular pit. So once we've created that, we also want to create a field. I'll probably put it under calculated. Here we go. We've got coal stockpile. Now we need to create a field. This is not creating how big the stockpile is. This is creating a field that we can draw a value off of. So in order to create the stockpile task, the coal processing task, we need a value that can be drawn from. So once we've created that, hopefully it becomes clear in a moment. Once we've created that, we want to add a single node, generally somewhere in the 0, something reasonably simple. And we're going to want to take the new stockpile value we created, and generally the easiest thing to do is to put roughly what in my example here, I'm just going to use this imported volume, but have the value that this new field has to be the entirety of whatever source quantity you're looking to work from. That just means you can never run out of your stockpile, essentially. So the stockpile here is now about 10 million. Relock the table, and once we've got a new position with a new field and the value in the field and the leaf on the table. So the next thing we need to do is create a process for the coal processing, and we're going to point that source quantity at this stockpile value we've created. Not interested in any of the other ones because this is really just a value to draw from. And then from here we're going to set up our equipment, and this is where we're going to define how quickly we can work this particular stockpile. And this is a simple example where we're only going to have one. It's only going to work at a fixed rate of arbitrarily, say 1,000 an hour. And we're just going to set the source path up as a start. There's only one leaf, so it doesn't really matter what you put in here. Now once that's done, if we go back to our constraint, so everything's set up to work the constraint now, but what we need to do before we finish up is two things. We need to set the removing task. So the removing task in this example is the processing, and we need to set at least one capacity. If you want to have multiple capacities, that just means you're saying that your inventory changes over time. In my example, I'm going to leave it at a fixed amount of, say, 200,000. So it gets what will happen is as coal is added to it, it gets to a point where it's no more than 200,000, and this will be taken off at that rate of 1,000 an hour and will be no less than 0. So if it hits 200,000, the coal tasks will be constrained. If it hits 0, then the removing tasks will be constrained. If the coal is being fed at a rate that the coal processing task can handle, then neither will end up constrained. It will end up being a process that feeds itself. So once we've created that inventory constraint, so we've started 50,000, maximum of 200,000, I suppose we'll run it and show the effect. So I've got a couple of things that I've set up earlier that I hadn't fixed up. So let's just get rid of those. Let's run again. You can tell I haven't rehearsed. So let's just go through and, okay, so yeah, that points out one of the things that I wanted to raise, which is that you want to make sure that cone dependencies and solid overlap dependencies are going to be looking for the values in here. You can't have your cold processing, you don't have a solid for cold processing. So I'm going to turn that one, switch that one off, and I'm going to take out the process for cold processing as well. So we'll never have centroids for that information. So we should be able to rerun that schedule now. I'll turn off the Hall profile on my next run, but I'll just show you. I've just guessed these numbers. I mean, there's going to be some mucking around that needs to happen, but what has happened if I go to pivot table, source quantity, and by process, let's just look at coal, and let's go by month. So you'll see that the values, whilst they aren't exactly the same, they are quite closely linked. That just means that in certain months, the coal is either coming in really early and hitting the stockpile limit, or more likely it's coming in really late at the month, and the coal processing, like in this example here, the coal exceeds in the month of June, but in the month of July, it's caught up. So you can see the effect that it has. I mean, in regards to setting these up, these can be set up in multiple ways. Once you understand the concept of the tasks that are being constrained, so you are either going to be constraining the task that's adding, so it's going to hit the limit, or you're going to constrain the task that's removing. You do have the ability to set source and destination, so if you wanted to, for some reason, control only tasks that were going from an area to another as part of this container, you can. But if you run into a particular scenario where you want to set it up in a certain way and this tutorial hasn't been enough, please contact us. Otherwise, thanks for listening.